Before you proceed, make sure you are completely alone. Close the door. Check your windows. If anyone is there, wait until they leave. This story is not meant to be shared aloud. He will know if you do. You may read it silently or record it, but only for yourself. Do not look away from the screen until you finish. He will know if you do. It started on a Sunday, November 4th, 2012. I was in my senior year of high school, and everything seemed normal. I had a girlfriend, a wonderful one, or so I thought. That night, she came over to work on a project. She needed an A to pass, so there was no time for distractions. By 8 o'clock, we were done, and with 2 hours left before she had to leave, boredom set in. My parents were out, leaving me in charge of my little sister. We decided to pass the time on the internet. After scrolling aimlessly, we landed on creepy videos. We'd both been fans of creepypastas before, but nothing scared us like it used to. We wanted something different, something that would chill us to the core. At 9:30, we were about to give up until we saw it. The thumbnail was strange. A man standing on a lawn, his head bowed, hair covering his face. No title. No author, just the words, "The man who looked down." This is it, we agreed. I clicked the link, and the video instantly filled the screen. The man from the thumbnail stood motionless on the screen. I moved my mouse to pause or escape, but there was no control bar. The keys didn't respond either. It was as if the video wanted us to watch. The scene was unsettling. The man stood on a lawn beside a tree swaying in the wind. Nothing else moved. We stared, waiting for something to happen. Seconds turned into minutes, and unease crept in. It wasn't just the stillness of the video, it was the feeling that something was wrong. Suddenly, I felt a sharp grip on my shoulder. My heart stopped. I turned, only to see my dad standing there. His face was pale, his mouth opening as if to speak. But before he could, my girlfriend screamed a blood-curdling sound that still haunts me. I whipped back to the screen. The man was no longer in the distance. He was there, right there, staring into the camera. His face consumed the screen. His hair had fallen away, revealing a nightmare. His nose was torn, the left nostril a gaping hole into his skull. His mouth stretched unnaturally wide, far beyond human limits, exposing a blackened row of jagged teeth. Part of his cheek was missing, leaving a raw, fleshy void. But his eyes, those eyes were the worst. One was blood red, veins bulging grotesquely. The other was stark white, its veins snaking outward like roots. Both stared straight through the screen, through me. There was no sound, only his gaze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stared. And then the screen went black. If you're reading this, know that he's watching. Do not speak of him. Do not look away. And whatever you do, don't click on a video without a title. He's waiting. Before you proceed, make sure you are alone. Shut the door. Check the windows. If anyone is nearby, wait until they're gone. Do not speak this story aloud, he will hear you. You may read it silently or record it, but never repeat it to anyone. And once you begin, do not look away. He knows when you do. The clock read 12:30 am before my computer abruptly shut off. I stared at the dark screen, my thoughts racing. It couldn't be right. We'd started watching the video at 9:30. It had felt like 5 minutes, maybe less. But 3 hours? I turned to my father, who had grabbed my shoulder earlier. He looked shaken, though he quickly masked it with anger. "She needs to leave." "Now," he said, his voice tight. My girlfriend didn't argue. She bolted out the door without even saying goodbye. My father lectured me something about disobedience and rules, but I barely heard him. My mind was stuck on the man in the video. He had moved. I knew he had moved the moment I looked away. And then there was the time, 3 hours gone, vanished into nothingness. When my father finished, I went to bed, though sleep didn't come easily. I kept seeing that face, those eyes in the darkness. The next morning started like any other. I got up, showered, dressed, and grabbed my things for school. But as I glanced out the window, I noticed something strange, a black smudge on the lawn. I blinked, and it was gone. I brushed it off as my imagination and headed to the kitchen. As I packed my lunch, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. My heart pounded as I turned toward the kitchen window. Slowly, I approached and peered outside, scanning the lawn. Nothing. The bus honked outside, snapping me from my unease. I grabbed my bag and ran out the door, the feeling of being watched prickling at the back of my neck. As I sprinted toward the bus, I couldn't shake the sensation that something or someone was following me. I climbed aboard, breathing heavily, and collapsed into a seat. The bus pulled away, and I forced myself to look out the window. My lawn was empty now, but for a split second, I thought I saw movement, just a flicker. And then I saw him. The man stood on my lawn, head bowed, hair covering his face. The bus turned a corner, and he disappeared from view. At school, I waited until second period to talk to my girlfriend. It was our only study hall together. But she didn't show up. I asked her friends if they'd heard from her. They hadn't. After school, I decided to check on her. Her house was close, so I ran there, anxiety gnawing at me. I knocked on the door, no answer. I pounded harder, loud enough to draw attention from the neighbors, still nothing. Her family was always home, always. I tried the doorknob. It turned easily. The door was unlocked. "Hello," I called, stepping inside. The house was eerily silent, no response. The lights didn't work when I flipped the switch. The bulb flickered briefly before shattering, plunging the room into darkness. But in that brief flash of light, I saw her. A woman stood in the kitchen doorway, motionless. I yanked open the curtains, flooding the room with sunlight. The doorway was empty now. I didn't go into the kitchen. Something told me not to. Instead, I climbed the stairs to her bedroom. The smell hit me before I even opened the door, a nauseating stench of rot and blood. My eyes burned as I stepped inside. And there they were. She was kneeling on the floor, her body covered in deep, jagged cuts. Blood pooled around her, soaking into the carpet. Her head was tilted up, her lifeless eyes fixed on him. The man stood over her, his head still bowed, his hair falling like a curtain over his face. But I knew he was looking at me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then slowly he raised his head. The face I had seen in the video stared back at me, but now it was worse. His nose was a gaping hole. His mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing blackened teeth. His eyes, one red, one white, pulsated with veins that seemed alive, writhing under his skin. And then he smiled. If you're reading this, it's already too late. He's watching you now. Do not look away. Do not turn around. He knows where you are. Before you read further, take a moment to ensure you're truly alone. Lock the doors. Shut the windows. Silence everything around you. And most importantly, don't look away from the screen, not for a second. If you look away, he will know. Before you read further, take a moment to ensure you're truly alone. Lock the doors. Shut the windows. Silence everything around you. And most importantly, don't look away from the screen, not for a second. If you look away, he will know. I stood frozen, paralyzed by what I was seeing. My girlfriend knelt on the blood-stained floor before the man, or rather the thing, as if in some grotesque trance. It felt like hours passed, though I know it was only seconds. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice a trembling whisper. "I'm sorry." Her head turned toward me then, and I saw her eyes split down the middle. One side red, the other a pale, milky white. My outstretched hand reached for her, but before I could pull her to safety, the creature lunged. It tore into her like a rabid animal, its claws raking through her flesh. Blood sprayed across the walls, her agonized screams slicing through the suffocating silence. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. Her cries faded into silence, and I turned to run. But the moment I looked away, he was on me. The force slammed me to the floor, and pain exploded through my back as his claws ripped into my skin. His disfigured face hovered inches from mine, a twisted grin spreading across his torn cheeks as he shoved pieces of my flesh into his rotten mouth. My screams echoed hers, raw and desperate, but I fought back. Somehow I managed to throw us both down the stairs. The sickening crack of bone erupted as I felt my arm snap, but the creature fell off me. Gritting my teeth through the searing pain, I scrambled to my feet and bolted toward the front door. The moment I reached the porch, I tripped, my face slamming into the concrete. White-hot agony shot through me as my nose broke and the skin of my cheek shredded against the ground. My vision blurred, blood pouring into one eye, but I managed to turn and look back. He was standing in the doorway watching me. His eyes, half red, half white, bore into me, filled with a malevolent hunger. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to beg, but all I could do was lie there in broken silence. He took a step forward, his body shifting in unnatural, jerking movements. Then he spoke, his voice a guttural rasp that reverberated in my skull. "Don't look down." And everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital. My body was broken, my back mangled, my face unrecognizable, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something clawing at the edges of my sanity. The police came to question me, but my story sounded insane, even to me. When they stopped searching for my girlfriend's killer due to lack of evidence, I felt something inside me shatter. That same day, they found my father's car abandoned in the woods. His body was never recovered. Months later, I was discharged from the hospital. My crooked body and disfigured face were nothing compared to the torment in my mind. When I returned home, the house was silent. My mother had hung herself. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I went straight to my computer, desperate to find the video, desperate to make sense of what had happened. But the video was gone. The man who looked down had disappeared. As I sat there, staring at the empty screen, an email notification popped up. No subject, no sender, just a link. My heart stopped. I knew what it was. I clicked it anyway. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, standing in front of another house. But this time, it wasn't just any house. It was mine. The smell of decay filled the room. The soft wheezing behind me grew louder, the sound of something unholy, something that shouldn't exist. I didn't dare turn around. I could feel his breath on my neck, his gaze boring into the back of my head. He wasn't looking down anymore. He was looking at me. I'm writing this as a warning. He finds his victims through the internet. If you're reading this, it may already be too late. Once I post this story, I will do what I must. I will turn around, and I will look down. Julie, I'm sorry. You're on your own now.